Hey, it's Jason from Bohemia Bees, and we're going to do a quick video on how we make our candles here at the Bohemia Apiary. We're going to show you how we take this raw beeswax that you see here. This is rendered beeswax, usually from cappings from a frame or other parts of comb that we've cleaned. I'll put a link in the description below showing you how we render beeswax, how we take it from the honeycomb, melt it down, clean it into these blocks that you see here. It's still pretty raw at this point, and there is some dirt on the back of it. You can scrape some of the dirt off, but it will need to go through one more process in order to get a clean amount of wax, and we'll show you how we're gonna do that in this video. Okay, so the things you're gonna need in addition to the raw beeswax that you see, you can buy this by the pound from us. We can also give it to you in this form as well, which needs one more round of cleaning before you can make a candle out of it to get any of the finer particulates out, but we'll show you how to do that. Some of the other things you need is we use these large handled aluminum tin can pails. These are specific for making beeswax or melting wax. You can see we don't use them for anything else other than that. There's some wax left in the bottom of them. We'll show you what they're for. We'll put a link in the description below where you can get those as well. We use a large saucepan. This is just for boiling water. We use a double boiler approach. So we're going to take and put the wax inside one of those pails inside the double boiler, allow this to bring to a boil and let it gradually melt over time. You don't want to make it too hot, which is why we do the double boiler, because if you make it too hot, you tend to burn your wax, discolors it, gets some of the fragrance out of it. It just doesn't really, not that appealing. So that's how we melt the wax down. A couple of things you're going to need to make candles. Naturally, you're going to need a mold, right? We've got a couple examples of molds. We have, several others that we use for making candles. You can see some examples of candles that we recently made. There's a floating candle. It's a honeybee floating candle. There's a honey pot that we have here, as well as a folded leaf. This is a popular candle on our website, so we make a lot of those. We also have your standard blocks. That's a 1 pound and then a 2 pound block that we can make as well for in case you want your own beeswax to be used and melted down for whatever purpose. There's different style of molds. You can see there's a rubber resin style mold, and there's some other lighter style molds that are all basically that latex resin. They come in different shapes, and you can get them at various places online. If you're making a block, it's pretty straightforward. You just use the mold, pour the wax in, you're good. If you're making a candle, a little more difficult in that you need to determine where you place your candle. So a lot of them have a hole in the bottom, you can see, and this is upside down. So this mold would basically be upside down. The candle wick would be through the top or the bottom of the mold. It's flipped over, poured, cooled, and then released. Same with the folded leaf. What we've done in this example is we've taken some standard wicking that we use, candle wicking, and we fed it through the bottom of the mold, and we pulled it out just a little bit more than you need. This will allow the candle, then you can trim back to the length you want when you want to finish it. The mold itself, you can't have the candle wick. One of the key things with making candles is that candle wick needs to be straight through. If it's to the side, then it will burn, strange. So we use different ways of holding that wick straight up and down. This is a piece of a device that can basically sit on top of your candle. You'll pour that string through there as it's cooling so that it will dry straight up and down. I'll show you how that works. One of the other things that one of my beekeeping mentors recommended you get is paintable mold release, right? So this is just a real sort of non-invasive, I guess, or whatever. There's no toxic chemicals in it. It dries. It allows your molds over time. You can probably do 2 or 3 molds without needing to spray, but after you've done a couple candles, 1 or 2 candles, or even if you want to do it between candles, just as long as it's completely dry before you actually pour your wax into the mold. So what I would say is, if you're going to be doing this, maybe spray it really light, just a quick spray like you see here into the mold, and that will allow it to dry and allow it to release from all the little corners and edges. All right, so let's fire up, now that we've talked about what you need, let's fire up the pot and get melting. As you can see, we've placed our wax right inside that pail, goes right inside the water, and we will allow this to sit for probably a good 15-20 minutes before it'll melt down completely, checking on it, making sure it's settled and ready before we pour anything. Okay, so our wax has been melting in the pot. You can see it's pretty much melted down. You'll see a lot of junk that's floated to the top surface, and we do a quick skim on that, sort of a transfer method into the pot you see next to us. That's why we have two pots. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to pull that out of that heat and put that slowly through the strainer to filter out any big pieces. And also can tell me where I'm at with the rest of the wax. Okay, and while that pot's hot, I'm going to go ahead and clean this pot out with a dry cloth in order to get that rest of that gunk, so I can transfer it back. So you can see that dry cloth pulled out a lot of that gunk that was on the bottom of that pan, and we're just heating it back up again quickly to wipe it down once more, and then we'll transfer what's in here, and that will help cleanse it. Okay, we've done that transfer to sort of clean out a lot of the particulates that are in the wax, and now we're going to go ahead and pour our candles. You see we've set 2 candles up, 2 molds. This is just another example of how you could use, we use a chopstick here and put the candle wick through and held it up straight. Same with our folded leaf. We're going to take our melted wax once it has settled a bit so that any of those remaining particulates sort of kind of fall to the bottom. We're going to come over here and we're going to pour our wax very carefully. Now I'm doing a little bit messy here because I'm doing this one-handed, but I think you get the point. They're a little bit overflowing. I typically do a little cleaner than that, but I'm doing it one-handed, so I apologize. But now that we've got them in, you want it to actually go to the edge of the candle, so it does slightly overflow. You can actually use wax paper, and when it dries, you can peel that wax off, drop it back in the pot, remelt it. But you want to make sure you fill that void cavity pretty full so that it makes the full candle. So we're going to let these dry, and then we'll pull them out of the mold and see what they look like. Okay, so we've let our candles harden, and now we can go ahead and start to pull them out of the molds. You can see they're probably for a good 2 hours or more. The longer they sit, the harder they get and the easier are to remove from the molds. So you want to make sure that you do let them sit. Even if it's overnight, that sometimes works as well also. You want to be careful that you don't pull that. If it's still soft in the middle, you don't pull that cord all the way through. You want to make sure it's still solid. So any additional pieces that on the candle, you can break them off and put them back and remelt them down. Let's go ahead and pull them out of the mold. Okay, so again, we're pulling it out of the mold. You can see definition looks really good. Nice clean wax, and you can trim those candle wicks down a little bit to make them a little more presentable. Definitely cut the bottom one off so it sits flat. And there you have a candle. Appreciate you watching how we do these. Remember, these are good for gifts. They smell great because they have the natural beeswax smell, pollen's in them, a little bit of pollen, maybe some trace elements of honey. They say that burning beeswax is better than burning paraffin because paraffin puts off diesel fumes when it burns, but beeswax puts off, I guess, a negative ion is what I read, which attracts the bad silt and dirt in the air to that ion and helps cleanse the air and purify the air. So that's one thing I read about beeswax candles, and burning beeswax candles are essentially better than burning traditional paraffin-based candles. So that's always a good thing to do that and help the environment. So if you like what you see here, and you want to see more things like this here on the Bohemia Bee channel, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button in the bottom right corner down there, and make sure you share with your friends and continue to follow us here on the Bohemia Apiary's Bohemia Bee channel, where beekeeping is definitely more than a hobby. It's an obsession. Thanks for watching.
This is what y'all can tell it.